And that's when it really sits in. How am I going to go on vacation and lay on a beach, without a drink in my hand? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And that's when I started to freak out, was after my 1 year. And that's when my sponsor really put it into words. She goes, you're not making anybody any promises. You're making yourself a promise every day. And that's all you can do.
That was Colleen Cline, and this is the SHAIR Podcast.
It's time for the SHAIR Recovery Podcast, where we bring you amazing life-changing success stories from addicts and alcoholics all over the world who share their inspiring journey in recovery. And now, here's your host,
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the SHAIR Podcast. And today we have Colleen Cline joining us on the show. And Colleen has a spectacular story where we delve into multiple pathways of recovery: Al-Anon, AA, aftercare, rehab, CODA. This is a story of a woman who was not about to give up on her marriage. And for many of us, as we go through this episode, and there's been other episodes where we've discussed codependency, enabling toxic relationships, in many of these situations, inevitably, the marriage fails or the relationship fails. But today, that is not how this story ends. Today, this story is about putting up a fight, about having the mentality that I will succeed or die trying. And there's a lot of takeaways from this episode for those of you that are in a relationship and the element of addiction is destroying the relationship. This is an episode that will walk you through what it takes to make that relationship work. So let's dive into Colleen's story. But first, let's talk about how you can support the SHAIR Podcast. If you'd like to know what's the best way to help support the show, here are a few of the best ways to do so. Number one, you can donate to the SHAIR Podcast. And to do so, you simply go to the website, www.theshairpodcast.com, and click on the top right corner of the website that says donate, or you can click on any of the yellow banners throughout the website that say donate via PayPal, and it will take you to our donate page. All the donations we collect go exclusively to promote, grow, and produce the podcast. So once again, if you have the wherewithal to do so and would like to donate to the SHAIR Podcast, then go to the website, click on the donate button, and make your donation today. The second way to help support the show is to subscribe on your mobile device. If you listen to the SHAIR Podcast on your phone and you click subscribe, you not only get notified every time a brand new episode is available, you also help support the show. When you subscribe, it dramatically increases our rankings on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, as well as other podcast platforms on the internet. And while you're at it, go ahead and leave us a 5-star rating and review, because I love to read those reviews at the beginning of every episode. And speaking of reviews, here's one from Stitcher Radio. It's from the Immortal Wizard. And they write, SHAIR Podcast is relevant. I have been a listener of the show for at least 2 years. Omar is a good speaker and gets his point across well. The SHAIR Podcast comes across genuine, and I sincerely believe he has the welfare of others on his mind. A wonderful influence in the recovery community. Thank you, Immortal Wizard. And there's no question about it. I care. It is all about destigmatizing addiction by focusing on recovery. HP, baby. And the third way to support the show and yourself is to join our Facebook private community. It's called the SHAIR Private Facebook Group. And what you will find in there is thousands of beautiful people in recovery, doing service, helping others, asking for help, being accountable, being available, showing up. If you are not a part of this group, go to Facebook, go to the search bar, type in SHAIR private group, and join today. And if you're already a member of the SHAIR Podcast private community, and you have friends that you feel would benefit from being in this amazing group, then invite them to join. The SHAIR movement is real, it's positive, and it's all about HP, baby. Now, a quick message from Transitions Daily, and then on to the show. Would you like to join a free, anonymous online group that offers a daily topic email with popular recovery resources accompanied by a secret Facebook group for discussion? Then go to dailyaaemails.com for more information about Transitions Daily. And don't forget to share dailyaaemails.com with friends, in meetings, and with sponsees in recovery. Hey, Colleen, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you on the show today. How you feeling?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Doing fantastic. Thank you. I'm ready to do this.
Okay.
All right. So, folks, today we have Colleen Cline joining us on the SHAIR podcast. Colleen emailed me because she wanted to share her story. She's one of the active members in the Facebook Private Accountability Group, and she is also involved in AA, Al-Anon, and an aftercare program. Is that about right, Colleen?
That about sums it up, yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so let's dive right in. So first of all, take us into your normal daily routine, including recovery.
Well, I have a full-time job, of course, and doing an aftercare program every Thursday night. I attended their intensive outpatient program when I first got sober, and as a reward, I should say, you're able to attend for the rest of your life for free every Thursday. And so I show up, and it's a good place for me to share and inspire other people and show them that you can do this and stay sober. I do attend Al-Anon every Saturday morning, and I also have a AA meeting that I attend every Saturday morning as well. So that's pretty much my average recovery outlook, if you will, on top of, your average life of work and marriage and bills and everything else.
Do you find it easy to balance all that, or is it challenging?
I do find it easy now. It was challenging at first, but once you get into a groove and you find the meetings that you like and you've got that network of people that you can rely on, it becomes very easy.
Yeah, I was curious because when I got your email, you told me that you were in AA and Al-Anon and aftercare, and I was like, man, there's very different dynamics between these programs. So it's got to give you have to be able to take a little bit of a different message, which must be pretty awesome, into your daily life. Do you find that you get the benefits of each and every one of these in a different way that you're able to apply in your life?
Oh, definitely. Of course, Al-Anon helps me with my codependency. I am married to, my husband is also in recovery, so my Al-Anon program really helps me as far as keeping me in place with that. And then, of course, the aftercare program, you get the educational background of it. You don't really get that too much in AA. It's more of a, AA is a lot of support, but you don't get a lot of the educational knowledge that you would need to get through and understanding addiction.
That's great. In many cases, I will recommend, especially to newcomers, depending on what I feel the family dynamic looks like. And if I sense that there's a little bit of codependency, in many cases, there's usually some traces of codependency. And so I usually say, hey, you might want to check out some Al-Anon meetings or some CODA meetings. Did you ever check out any CODA meetings?
I did. I went to one CODA meeting. It really wasn't for me. And in fact, Al-Anon wasn't really for me in the beginning either. I showed up expecting people to show me how to keep my husband sober. And when they couldn't do that, I was like, well, I'm out of here, But I promised my sponsor I would keep going and keep trying different meetings. And, you really have to just keep trying and keep going and search out the one that works for you.
Yes. So do you feel that for many people that are in AA, that Al-Anon would be a very beneficial addition?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I noticed that the same people in my AA meeting at 7:30 in the morning are the same people in my AA meeting at 9 o'clock.
Wow. So, okay.
Yeah. So they get a lot out of it.
I think that for those of us listening, I have recommended it myself, just to be able to understand, these, how to draw good, healthy limits and boundaries in your life, communication skills, understanding, what roles you play. A lot of times now that I'm a counselor over at Costa Rica Recovery, one of the things I like to introduce them to that they've never seen is codependent drama triangle, the Cartman triangle. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people have never even heard about that, but they can recognize when they've played a victim or a hero or an aggressor role, and they're like, "Oh yeah, okay, that sounds about right." So I think that, and we don't discuss any of that in AA meetings, right? So I think that it would be a good mix. So I'm gonna encourage people to check it out. I might even go into one, even though I'll tell you what I did. I mean, even the reason why I knew about that was because I had such a dysfunctional codependent relationship with my ex-wife. So my sponsor introduced me to all this.
Yes.
So I did separate research on codependency, and that's when I started to discover all those different roles and started to get better and started becoming independent. So once I got through that, I really kind of bypassed that and started actually having some healthy relationships, because I knew what I was looking for. I knew what my core values were. I knew what my core beliefs were, and it was easier to attract somebody that were in the same alignment. So I think that it's definitely beneficial, and I'm glad you're in it. So hopefully, as you know, you're going to tell your story. I'm going to let you go, and you're going to tell your story after a few more questions. So yeah, I'd really like to get a nice deep dive when we journey into your recovery part of your story, like really touch into, how both of those programs have impacted your life. All right?
Definitely.
Excellent. Good. All right. So on a daily basis, how do you maintain your spiritual condition, that conscious contact with a higher power?
Well, the first thing I do, I'm really, really bad at getting up in the morning and just sitting and being still. I'm terrible at it. When I get up out of bed, I am ready to go. So I'm in the car and I am on my way to work. But the minute I do sit at my desk, I have my 10 minutes of quiet time, and I have my one day at a time books, my meditational books, and I sit there and I read, and I just sit there for 15 minutes. And I really do have to, force myself to do that. Mm-hmm. I'm a real busybody. And so I have a reminder on my phone, and my husband was really good at sending it to me. And it's, are you being the best person you can today? And I have that on my iPhone, and it pops up every day at 6 a.m. And it's a reminder to me to be the best person that I can today. And it keeps me from getting involved in the office drama. It keeps me from getting irritated on the road. It just really keeps me focused.
That's fantastic. I can't emphasize a morning routine enough. Just finding that practice. And I like that. What is it again? What does your phone say?
Are you being the best person you are today?
Are you being the best person? Are you being the best person you can be, or
you can be today?
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. So you automatically have a nice little affirmation that you can roll with, right off the bat, 6 o'clock in the morning, and go, and get you set in the right direction. Because I find that if I don't do that, I'm just chasing my tail all day. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how it makes such a big difference. But I've done so many interviews now, and the people that are the most grounded all have a solid morning routine, and so I started. I was haphazard about it, but I have been completely committed to it, at least for the last 3 months. And it's just a spectacular difference. So I've always had one of those practices, but I know what it does, but I know when things go well, I get into a groove, some things are going right. The first thing that goes is the meditation.
Yeah.
And that's what was put me in the right state of mind in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
It's crazy. All right. So tell us, Colleen, how much clean time you have, and when is your anniversary date?
Anniversary date is December 22nd of 2009. So I have 7 years and 8 months clean from alcohol.
Absolutely fantastic. I love it. You said from alcohol.
From alcohol, because I distinguish that because I am an alcoholic. So I never had a problem with drugs. So
does that mean you still do drugs?
I don't do drugs, no.
Let's be clear here. When you make a statement like that, people are listening go, wait a minute, from alcohol
Yeah.
I mean, you're on the marijuana maintenance plan.
Yeah, right.
All right, good. So 7 years, 8 months, clean.
Clean altogether.
All right.
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love it. So tell us, how old were you the first time you drank or used drugs? And more importantly, how did they make you feel?
I was 18 years old, my first semester in college. My first drink was, of course, a wine cooler. Because that's all your roommates in college
Totally.
stocked, in the refrigerator that they had in the dorm. And, I know we'll get into this later, but I grew up, my mother was a recovering alcoholic. So I drank at a later age, and so I kind of stayed away from alcohol. But when I was 18 and on my own and someone offered me a drink, I thought, well, yeah, it couldn't hurt to try it. And it tasted like pop,
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't really even taste the alcohol in it. But I just remember the warm feeling that came over me, and there was about 8 people in our dorm room, and I really just, for the first time in my life, I didn't care if I sounded awkward. I didn't care what they thought of me, and I thought, wow, this is really neat. This is great. So it just kind of, took off from there.
I think we're probably close to the same generation growing up. When you say wine cooler, it dates you.
Yeah, it does.
I went right back in time, the little 4-packs, and they were delicious.
Yes.
Oh my God, too funny. All right, so Colleen, you are all warmed up.
Okay.
So it's time for me to turn this show over to you. It's time for you to share your story, the battle against drugs and alcohol, the wreckage it caused in your life, when you hit rock bottom, and then finally your journey into recovery up until today. So Colleen, please take it away.
Well, I am an only child. I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada for the majority of my,
Telling.
I remember the first time I saw my mom drunk. My parents, they loved parties, the block parties. We knew our neighbors. Halloween was a big thing, and my dad would take me around to the neighbors, and I didn't realize this until later, but the neighbors would have shots for the parents, and candy for the kids. And that's what they did in the neighborhood, But I remember the first time I saw my mother drunk, I was 5 years old, and they were having a party. And I asked the lady, they were carrying my mother to the bedroom. And I said, "What's wrong with mommy?" And she said, "Oh, she's just tired." And I emphasize that because it played an important role. That excuse played an important role as I got into adolescence, and my mother's drinking escalated. So her drinking got really bad when I was probably in junior high, and I did not have friends over. I did not do after-school activities. I just simply went to school and came home. There was times that she would show up drunk at school, picking me up. And so when I did have friends over, which was rare, the first question they would ask me is, "Well, what's wrong with your mother?" "Well, she's just tired, And so I remember this went on for maybe about, I'd say 5 years. Her drinking just got worse and worse. And my dad came home one day and he says, "How would you like it if your mom and I got a divorce?" And at that point I was like, well, yeah, I just can't take it anymore.
Right.
Well, within 5 minutes, my dad changed his mind and took my mom to a place called Raleigh Hills in the middle of the desert, and dropped her off, and she was there for 2 weeks. And, she got back home, she relapsed, but she got back on the wagon, and she was sober for 32 years until she passed away a year and a half ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was sober for 32 years. So she got sober when I was 13 years old.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So throughout high school, I didn't hang around people who drank. I went to a Christian high school here in Sacramento, California. And of course, drinking and drugs were frowned upon because you definitely go to hell if you tried that stuff. So finding friends that, didn't drink or use was not hard. But when I went to college, and it was a state school here in California, Chico State, California, my first semester there, I got a roommate, and of course the partying started there in my college years. And, you're in college, you're stupid, things happen, you black out, people laugh at you, it's part of college, and you don't see it as a problem. Yeah. And it's not that it happened all the time, I can probably count the number of fingers on my hand of when it actually was a problem for me in college. But, I turned 21 and I thought, wow, I can sit at the bar like a grown-up and order a grown-up drink now. I don't have to, settle for the beer kegs and the under 21 drinks anymore, And, so, I'd go to bars with my friends and I'd have my martinis and my wine. And throughout my 20s, I could drink with control because I could go to the bars and I always had to drive myself home. I was single, so I had to be responsible, and I would stop after one drink. And I would not go home to my apartment and drink, because if you went home to your apartment and drank alone, that would make you an alcoholic. I had all,
you had that going.
Right.
That was clear.
All the rules. I had all the rules. But it doesn't mean, looking back, it doesn't mean that I still didn't drink alcoholically, because I still wanted more. I just was able to say no at that time, but it doesn't mean I didn't want more,
Yep.
So, I did pretty well within my 20s and drank responsibly. And everybody laughs when I say this because they think it's a death wish, but it's not. I got married at 29.
How is that a death wish?
I always end my story, well, then I got married. And they think, oh, well, then that's when she started drinking. Well, no. I got married, but now I had somebody who could drive me home. Who could clean me up, who could put me to bed, and take care of me and basically be a babysitter for me. And so that's when I would say my drinking really started to take off.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And so my husband and I, we met in a bar, of all places, and we actually met on Valentine's Day. I was with my girlfriends, and he was by himself on a bar stool, and we just kind of hit it off and moved in together 4 months later, got married 3 months after that, so it was a really quick relationship, but, we were just buddies from the start, best of friends. So, so needless to say, we were drinking buddies as well. And, we traveled together, and we had our, Jack Daniels. Jack Daniels was probably my drink of choice towards the end there. So I went from, the wine coolers to the wine to the martinis. And then in the end, it was just, whiskey.
Was this the progression? Let me guess. It was first it was whiskey and Coke. Then it was just whiskey on the rocks. And then it was whiskey neat.
You're going to laugh at this. So when I started to think I had a drinking problem, I thought, well, I'll go back to martinis, because martinis are hard to make, right? You got to put your vodka, you got to put your olives, vermouth, you got to put your olives in there. It's a lot of work, and I thought, well, if I go back to martinis, and I won't drink anymore because it's just too much work. And then forget the vermouth, and then forget the olive, and now you're just drinking vodka, so that just didn't work either.
Yeah. It's some sort of like, you're trying to, be the I don't know what, the chemist, right?
Yes.
And it always ends up going, forget it, just give me the bottle.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, so it really got bad. It started out with me getting drunk at parties. And then it started out, we have the weekend, let's just get drunk on the weekend. And then, you know how it progresses. Then you get drunk every night. And I would say that, around the last 3 years of my heavy drinking is when things started to get really bad. Now, I started to get a lot of anxiety attacks, to the point where I couldn't get in the car and drive myself across town. My hands would just lock up. And I thought, God, what's going on? I went to psychiatrists, and I thought, what's going on with me? And the first question they would ask you is, well, do you drink? Well, yeah, I have a glass of wine. You lie to them, but you say, I have a glass of wine. And they said, well, you might want to be careful with that, because alcohol can actually cause anxiety. And I thought, no, it doesn't. It's supposed to help with anxiety. I didn't listen to them at all, but it just got worse and worse, to the point where, I'd get up in the morning, and if I had to do a business trip to the Bay Area, I would immediately put a Xanax. I'd take a Xanax because I knew I was going to have a fit on the road, And So it was just torture. I couldn't go anywhere by myself. I just would freak out, and it was just awful. And so it just, that was the physical aspect of it. And then, of course, with the marriage, now I never got a DUI. I didn't lose my job, and I didn't lose my house. So that's the first thing I put out there, because I think it's important for a lot of people who say, well, I haven't lost this, I haven't lost that, I still have some room to screw up here. You know what I mean? That's your mind. I haven't hit rock bottom, so I still have some time left to drink or use, And, but I was definitely on my way to having legal problems. I was definitely on my way to losing my marriage. The last 3 years, my husband and I were fighting tremendously. I mean, physically fighting, verbally fighting. And I was the type of drunk that would black out. Not pass out, but black out. So I could not remember anything, what I said the night before, what I did the night before, or anything like that. And now I would get up every morning, and I wasn't the type of alcoholic that had I would say the physical cravings. I definitely had the mental obsession.
Yep.
Yeah. I didn't wake up saying, oh my God, I need a drink. I would just wake up and say, oh my God, I'm hungover. I feel crap. I'm never doing this again, And then by 4 p.m. you feel a little better, and it's like, oh, well, time for a drink. That was my routine every day. So I would like to say that my claim to fame, I should say the worst thing that comes to my mind with my husband and I fighting was, one night we got into a huge fight, and so I threatened to call 911, and he said, well, fine, go ahead, call 911 if you think they're going to do anything. Well, you don't ever dare a drunk to do anything, because they're going to do it.
Man.
Yeah. So I called 911.
Of course.
And I hung up. Well, 911 calls back, just a little FYI. And they called me back, and I said, oh, I meant to call 411. I'm sorry. Well, the operator could tell I was drunk, and she says, well, we're going to send police over there anyway.
Oh, man.
And within 5 minutes, I blacked out. All right, I passed out. I actually passed out upstairs, and the police apparently showed up, and they said, well, have you two been drinking? And my husband says, well, yes. Well, obviously I wasn't going anywhere because I was already asleep upstairs. So they ended up taking my husband down to the drunk tank.
Oh, my God.
And I wake up around 3 a.m. I don't know where my husband is. I look outside. His truck's still there. Walking around the house, can't find him. And I'm just worried sick. I don't know where he is. I can't remember anything. And I get a phone call at maybe 6 a.m. from a payphone saying, don't talk to me, just leave the cash on the front door for a cab, and I don't want to talk to you, I don't want to see you. He was really, really upset with me. But that wasn't the first time that the cops showed up at our house, for some kind of domestic, issue that we were having.
But you both were drinking, right?
We both were drinking.
Okay, so it was like your marriage was in trouble, but it was because you were both sabotaging it.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. And, I used to sit on the couch and watch the show Cops. I think, how do these people ever let their lives get that out of control? And here I am, one of them, And so it's like, this is not the person I ever thought I would be, ever. But yeah, when I got drunk, I got mean. I just got verbal. I turned into a child. I turned into a 3-year-old. My husband said I was like Veruca Salt, from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Daddy, I want a goose. I want it now.
Oh, yeah.
That's the person I turned into when I drank. And so yeah, that went on for probably about 3 years of just fighting and threatening to leave. And I did leave, and I came back, and I'd leave, and I'd come back, and it was just a circle of chaos in our household. And, it just got to the point where I had it, he had it, and the last night I drank, which was December 21st, He had a big interview the next day with the county, and I apparently got really violent and to the point where he just went to a motel because he just couldn't take me anymore. And that's when I thought, I can't do this anymore. So my intention at the time was to leave my husband. I said, that's it, I'm leaving. And I packed up my stuff. And somewhere between leaving my house and going to my parents' house, I said, you know what? You've got some stake in this. You have a problem. And so I ended up going to my mom and dad's house, and I said to my mom, I said, I think I have a drinking problem. And she goes, I think you do too. And she says, well, I know some people who can probably get you into, it was a woman's house, Carmichael, Alpha Oaks, here in Carmichael, California. And she says, I think they can get your room. And my mom says, well, do you think you might want to wait till after Christmas? And I said, Mom, if I wait till after Christmas, I'm not going to go.
Now, wasn't your mom in recovery at that time?
Well, she's 32 years sober. Yes, she was alive, and she was celebrating probably 29 years sobriety at that time.
But was she in the program or was she just sober?
Oh, no, she's in the program. Yeah, she had people in AA that she called and said, hey, my daughter needs help. Where can she go? And, it's funny because I work in the healthcare industry. I work for a healthcare insurance company. And people say, well, why didn't you just use your benefits and use your EAP program? I'm thinking, well, when you're in that state, you're not going to know. You can ask where to go and you just go. And so I ended up going to a women's house, and my husband didn't know where I was. And he flipped out. He had his own problems, and by the third day I was able to call him, and he says, well, I don't know if we can stay married if this is the route we're going to go. And I said, I don't know if we can either. And at that point, we both had to be willing to accept that. But he was on his road. He was drinking really heavily to the point where he had to go down and stay with his parents because he was uncontrollable. And I said to my mom after, I think it was 2 weeks. I think I stayed there 2 weeks. I said, I think I'm ready to go. And my mom says, well, where are you going to go? I said, well, I'm going to go back home. It's my house, And she says, you're going to drink. You're going to drink because he's drinking and you're going to drink. And I thought, I'm not going to drink. And so I went home, and my husband was struggling. He was drinking, and we talked him into getting him into a recovery program in Napa 4 days after I got back home. So he got into his first recovery program. And I say first because there's been, a few. He's relapsed a couple times on his road.
Okay.
But, I maintained my sobriety, and it was hard, very hard. And people say, well, what kept you from drinking, even when you had your husband drunk around you? And all I could think about at the time was I put so many people through so much drama. My parents, my in-laws, my husband, my employer, because I told them I was going to take 30 days, and I'm just going to take 30 days. I put them through a lot of drama. If I were to cave now, it would have all been for nothing.
Yes.
I just got to keep going. And so my husband stayed sober for 60 days and then relapsed, and then we got him into this place called Azure Acres. They offer an inpatient and outpatient. So at 6 months sobriety, my husband went up to their inpatient program in Sebastopol, and he only agreed to go if I agreed to go to their intensive outpatient program. So I agreed to go. So here I am 6 months sober, and I'm brand new in this, IOP program, and everybody around me is, they're just brand new sober, and here I have 6 months, it kind of threw everybody off. But I'm so glad I did it because I got the education that I needed. I understood what pause was. I understood what how the alcohol and drugs affect your brain and how long it really takes for alcohol to leave your system. And the director there, she's just fabulous and took me under her wing. So I developed a whole new network there, and I'm really, really thankful for that program because they've done so much for us, both of us. So I like to say, sobriety, my first 5 years of sobriety was probably really hard because I think my husband and I faced every turmoil you can think of. My husband is diagnosed bipolar. He was diagnosed after his second recovery program, or his second counseling program. So within the first 5 years, we had to deal with his adjustment of meds, and that's where my codependency really had to come in because I was in charge of his meds. I was afraid he was going to relapse. And he did relapse. He relapsed about 3 times within my sobriety, and I stayed sober throughout that. And you asked for my bottom. When I hit my bottom with drinking on December 21st, but I hit my bottom with my codependency on my husband's 3rd relapse. And when I say that, it's because, throughout his sobriety, I tried real hard to keep him sober. I mean, here I am, an alcoholic, going to a liquor store to get him alcohol so he wouldn't get a DUI.
Yeah.
I mean,
madness.
Yeah. And when he's trying to get up to, rehab, the first thing they want to do is keep them drinking because they could go into seizures. So here I am, a recovering alcoholic, feeding him vodka just so he won't have, just so we can get him up to, the house up there. So there was a lot of boundaries there that I probably crossed, but I felt I could handle it, and I did, but not something I would really recommend. I did have help. I had a sponsor who was willing to come over and pour the alcohol for me, So I would not recommend anything 6 months after 6 months sober, or even a year, kind of playing with that environment. But it was just something that I felt it was, part of my path and what I did. But I did hit my bottom with my codependency with my husband on his 3rd relapse, because at that point I thought, God, I can't do anything more for this man. I've done everything I can. And towards the end, he was just basically living in our bathroom floor, drinking himself to death. And I thought, he's either going to die within the next 2 weeks or he's going to get up to rehab. And I just had to go about my day. I had to go to work. I had to show up, not knowing what I was going to come home to. And, all the while, keep in mind these first 5 years, we've had, of course, my husband's bipolar diagnosis, relapses. I got pregnant for the first time at the age of 41. We were trying to have kids, throughout our marriage, and couldn't have kids. And all of a sudden I get pregnant at 41.
Wow.
And, then I miscarry, and then I find out I can't have kids. Then my husband loses his job, and now we've got unemployment, and we're about to lose our house. We had to file bankruptcy. And people say, well, what does sobriety look like for you? And I don't want to give them that story. It's kind of like sitting across the room from an AA meeting from, a guy with a peg leg and a fake eye saying, and you too can have what I have.
Yeah, right.
But but the important factor is that by staying sober, we have been able to get to where we are today. And if I were to pick up at any of that point, I would be right back where I was, probably worse. So that's, that was probably the first 5 years of our sobriety. And like I said, it was hard. My first 2 years were hard. People say, well, I've been sober for a year. It should be easier. And I thought, yeah, your first year, you're just trying to stay sober. The second year is when you really dig into the steps. Mm-hmm. With my sponsees, I do the steps over, and I do it in a different manner, because that's when you really learn to live life without drugs and alcohol, it's your second year. I always used to live my life at what if. Well, what if and you're going to laugh because I used to tell my sponsor this. I said, well, what if I end up in Ireland and I'm on a beer tour? Or what if I end up in Russia And, I go to the ice bar, and she looks at me and she goes, well, are you going to Russia anytime soon, Colleen? And I said, well, no, but what if, And we play that what if game, and I really romanticize alcohol. I find it romantic. I find it inspiring. I find it, a sunset is a great sunset, but with a martini, it's a Hemingway sunset. You know what I'm saying? I can really romanticize it. And so that's when my sponsor says to me, she goes, Colleen, I never said I was going to quit drinking forever. I just said I wasn't going to drink for today. And that really hit home with me. I can reevaluate my sobriety anytime I want to. But today I choose not to. And you just do that one day at a time until, I've lived 7 years now without alcohol. Frankly, it doesn't even enter my mind anymore. But, those first 2 years, let's face it, alcohol is legal. It's everywhere. It's not like you have to go across town to your dealer's house. You go to the grocery store and it's there. You go to a wedding and it's there. And, you get to the point where you have accepted life without alcohol. And you develop those coping skills, and that's what your network is for. That's what your program is for. And people say, well, what kind of program do you have? I'm like, well, I don't have a program. I have a portfolio. I have a portfolio. And anybody who has a 401k will understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You don't put all your eggs in one basket. I've got a counselor that I see once a month, and then, of course, I named off my other recovery programs as well. So, that's what my recovery looks like today. And I remember this comedian, I don't know if you know who he is. His name is Mark Lundholm, if you've ever heard of him.
No.
He's a comedian who does a lot of recovery comedy. And he showed up one time and he did a lecture for us, and he explained it very well. He explained the opinion tree. Every morning when you get up, you have options. Every morning you have options. You have two options. You can drink or not drink. Based on the option you choose, you could have two more options. So if I choose to drink, I have no more options.
Mm-hmm.
If I choose to drink, hey, guess what? Now I have two more options. I can go to work. I can choose not to go to work. So that's what sobriety looks like for me. I have options now. I have challenges. I have concerns in my life like everybody else does, but I have options and I have support who I can go out to, who can give me feedback and be there for me.
That's an amazing story, and there's so much in there. I'm going to dig for more because I really want to know about what I'm curious the most about is this turmoil or this cyclone that was going on towards the tail end. You're in the middle of your recovery. He's in the middle of multiple relapses, right? Mm-hmm. You're coming to grips with your codependency, right? Mm-hmm. At any moment, did you move out? Did you live somewhere else? Or did you power through all this under the same roof?
Good point, because I left that part out.
Yeah, I'm like, how are you doing this?
I did. Well, when he went to his first recovery program in Napa and came back out, and he relapsed after 60 days, that's when I came downstairs and I said, well, you've got a choice. It's either me or the bottle. And he put the bottle in front of me and he says, it's going to have to be the bottle. And I said, okay, I'm out. So I went upstairs and I packed all my stuff and I, again, moved home to mom and dad. And so within that time frame, we were separated for, I think, about a month. But we were really looking. We were looking at divorce. I mean, we were making the plans of divorce. He finally got down to his parents' house again, because he couldn't stay in the house by himself. He was suicidal. We had 2 dogs, and we had to board the dogs until we could figure out what was going on. So I went to go meet with a bankruptcy lawyer who gave me, all kinds of advice. And we decided to meet halfway at our house. He drove up from his parents' house in Livermore, and I drove up from my parents' house. We met at our house. And he said he doesn't want a divorce. We can work it out. And I said, you're going to have to get sober. You're going to have to do it. Otherwise, we can't do this. It's just not going to work. So we agreed to try it again, and, through his relapses, I guess the reason I just didn't give up is because I saw that he really did want to get sober. He just didn't know how. And I think the diagnosis with the bipolar, it is a huge factor in his recovery, because by diagnosing that, it solved a lot of problems. He said to me, he says, well, I just can't get my mind to stop, and that's why I drink. My mind spins, and it just won't shut up. And so when he was in his second recovery house, I thought, there's something there. And I made an appointment with a psychiatrist. So the minute he got out, he had an appointment with a psychiatrist waiting for him. And so that's when they diagnosed him. And that first year was really tough because you're dealing with the medication, what's good, what works, what doesn't. And I thought to myself, my God, if he doesn't relapse off of this, I don't know. I don't know what will. But he really struggled through that first year, just trying out the medication. And it was hard on me. The mood swings, walking on eggshells. And that's where I had to go back to Al-Anon. Because, Al-Anon, what I found comforting about Al-Anon, it wasn't so much about people in there who have family members who are drinking. There were people who had family members who were struggling with mental illness, who were having problems with just difficult teenagers and didn't know how to deal with them, And I thought, wow, these people, they can take time out of their chaotic life from babysitting their loved ones to show up here for 1 hour. I can do that too.
Yeah.
I can do this. So, yeah, there was that, along the way too.
So you guys separated for about a month, then got back into the ring. He got diagnosed, right? Then there was that whole first year of his sobriety because he stopped drinking, correct?
Correct.
And so there was a lot of the mood swings and all of that. So looking back, right? Because in many cases, when we share our experience, strength, and hope, it's for the sole purpose of helping the people that are listening. So, what are the takeaways from these 7 years? Because it seems like for at least, I would say, 4 of those 7 years, you were battling really hard. Could it be 4 or 5, or was it safe to say at least 4?
4, yeah.
Okay, so what are some of those takeaways? Would you do it all over again? Would you do it differently? I mean, seriously, there's nothing you can do about it now, but for those of us listening, I'm usually the kind of person that is like, I try and play devil's advocate as much as possible because, living in this kind of a situation could push anyone over the edge at any moment, right? The amount of work that it took you could drive anyone to drink.
Right.
Right? So what are the takeaways that, the do's and the don'ts, and would you do it all over again, and what would you do different?
Oh, would I do it all over again? Well, of course, the question is, do I know the outcome? And the answer would be yes. But, what gets you through it, I think, is really having a higher power. And I used to think, God, just get me out of this. Just get me out of it. What I have taken away from all this is I've learned to say, God, just get me through it, because you got to go through it. There's going to be things you're going to go through in your life. And I can easily say, looking back, this whole thing made me stronger, and it did. It really pushed me to my limits of what I didn't think I was capable of, and I was. But it really gets you grounded. It makes you understand what's really important in life. It's not about the house, which we almost lost. It's not about the car. It's not about your coworkers who, if I were to drop dead tomorrow, they'd find somebody else to do my job. It's not about all the things I used to put so much importance on. And going through all that is like a big wake-up call. So am I thankful I went through it? Yes, I am thankful I went through it. Would I want to go through it again? No. And your first thing is you think to yourself, well, I've been through hell. Why am I so afraid, or why do I have fear of what's yet to come? Why would I think that? And the answer to that is, well, Can I get through anything in my life? Sure, I think I can get through anything in my life. But do I want to go through the chaos in my life again or anything? No, I don't want to. So you go right back into that mode of trying to avoid, and you get back into that fear mode. I'm going to avoid this because I don't want to go through this again. I don't want to go through bankruptcy again. I don't want to go through another relapse again. And so you get right back into your old habits of codependency and trying to fix things and make sure everything's in place so it doesn't happen again. And you catch yourself and you think to yourself, wow, you're causing yourself more chaos trying to juggle everything that hasn't even happened yet and probably won't. You got to step back and you got to say to yourself, you know what? If it happens again, you're going to deal with it at that time, like I did before. I didn't have a plan. I didn't plan on my husband being an alcoholic. I didn't plan on myself being an alcoholic. I dealt with what I dealt with at that time, and it worked out. You know what I mean?
I do.
So yeah, that's probably the message I really try to focus on.
So, what was your process then for forgiving him?
Well, of course, you do your 12 steps. You go through the whole, my step 4, writing down what I did wrong, what my part was in it. And I'm not talking about the 12 steps in just the AA program. I also do the 12 steps in the Al-Anon program, so you get both views on that. Yep. And I can see where I did wrong on both programs for sure. But the process of forgiving him was opening up, being transparent, listening to him, understanding him, having empathy, not staying mad, and seeing the fact that he really did try. He was really trying, and seeing that he was doing what he was supposed to be doing. Those were the things I saw in him that I was able to forgive him and get rid of the resentments too.
No, beautiful, beautiful. There is so much, a lot of takeaways, so much, so many adversities, so many challenges, so many obstacles that you've had to face throughout your life. It's no wonder, obviously, that you were currently in AA, currently Al-Anon, currently aftercare. It's and this is a very important takeaway because there's a lot of people that want to do what you did and just can't. They can't. Yeah. It's just too much. I would never recommend it. If somebody was to tell me, hey, I just love him so much and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Mm-hmm. But are you willing to go to AA and Al-Anon and aftercare and do all the work on you that gives you that solid foundation, that solid support group, the higher power? Everything has to be in alignment. You have to come in as a warrior with shields and armor and all you got to have your battle gear on a daily basis, complete awareness, and that's the only way to battle through this. And so that is another big takeaway as well. It's like, if you're going to get into this, then you have to be the strongest version of yourself. You got to get that little timer on your phone that says, are you being the best version of yourself today? Because that's what you need.
Exactly. And you really have to keep your programs separate too. We tried that whole thing of, hey, let's go to an AA meeting together. Yeah, that works for about a month.
Can't share.
And then you get pissed off because he doesn't want to go, and then you start thinking, oh, if he doesn't want to go, then he's going to relapse, and you start getting into each other's program, and it just gets ugly from there. And, both people have to be strong. If you don't, you're leaning on each other, and that's not healthy either, So
how long did it take before the fog lifted for him? Because he was dealing with bipolar, he's dealing with early recovery, he's dealing with a marriage that's on the rocks, and a wife that's just at her wit's end. So when did the fog start to clear? When did you start seeing some light at the end of the tunnel for his recovery?
Well, of course, after he had his 1-year chip, I thought, wow, this is big, because he would always relapse. I remember I bought him a 1-year chip and he relapsed right before the 1 year. I was so pissed. But he went to his psychiatrist. He went to counseling. he just, I saw him doing the work,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
you know, and, even though he's sober, it's people say, wow, he's sober and things must be really easy. It's still not easy. When you're dealing with somebody with bipolar and dealing with those mood swings that can take him to a very dark place, you still got to have your program in place. You know what I mean? And so he still battles that, but it's doable. He knows to take his medication and he knows what he needs to do. And I have no control over him. I'm not his mom. I'm his wife. And so I have to keep those two things separate.
How long did it take before you could do that?
Probably about 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now let's fast forward. Let's jump into 4 years. He's got 4 years. How have the last 2 years of his sobriety been for you guys as a couple, married?
Well, it's been, I would say, well, actually he has 5 years. He had 5 years in April.
Okay.
So I should just, yeah, but he, a lot of people say, wow, it must be hard to have two people married in recovery. And I thought, well, yeah, at first it is. But actually I find it a lot easier because we bounce ideas off of each other. We learn to be transparent. We are both working on ourselves. I have to learn to be present. I have to work on that for myself. He has to learn to be more patient. There's things that we know we have to work on, and we make recommendations to each other. We communicate to each other. We have these things, I call it a come to Jesus meeting on Saturday. So every Saturday we have our coffee, and it's a come to Jesus meeting where we just get it out on the table and we're just honest and what's bugging us, because communication, that's the hardest part. When I was drunk, I would tell you anything that was on my mind. I had no problem with that. But being honest, sober, that's really hard for me. It's really hard for me to sit down and say, you know what, this is bothering me. I mean, I need to talk to you about this, and your codependency thing is like, well, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to piss him off because I don't want to stress him out. He might go back to drinking. I remember listening to one of your last interview people. She said, well, she was a codependent, and she says, well, I don't want to stress him out. Well, she's like, well, what's stress? Anything could be stress. I mean, the car breaking down is stress,
Yeah.
I mean, and so you learn not to walk on eggshells sober. You learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. If that makes any sense.
Of course it does. And that is something that we teach, that's something that we teach, patients early in recovery, is that you're going to feel uncomfortable. And the sooner you can get comfortable feeling uncomfortable, the better you are, the more chances you have of staying clean one more day, because you're going to be feeling feelings that you haven't felt in a long time. You're going to have thoughts that you haven't thought in a long time that you've normally numbed out. And now you're going to have to process these feelings, thoughts, emotions sober. And it's going to be uncomfortable, and you have to learn how to sit with that. So it absolutely makes sense. And again, the takeaways to all this is, number one, yes, I think that two people in recovery can have an amazing relationship as long as they each have their own individual programs. They're working them individually. I wouldn't say you get involved in anybody's recovery, but the communication is going to be very different because you come from different places, right? Once you've worked through the steps, your ability to communicate changes. So you're not coming from a place of either where you're not either defensive or you're being aggressive or combative, right? You're coming from a place of love. And so, and as a team, you develop this ability to work together now as a team. You guys have been through a lot. So it would make sense that after this giant war that you guys just, fought, each one, battling with the disease in their own form, and both with just all these different, both of them were like these 7-headed demons, right? You've got the bipolar, and you got the alcoholism, and you got, whatever, and then you've got the codependency and the alcoholism, and so there's so many things that you have to work through, and the important thing is that you do everything in your power to get yourself well first.
Right.
You got to put what does it say? You have to put your oxygen mask on first. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've heard that a bunch of times in Al-Anon and Coda. They always say you got to put on your oxygen mask first before you help anybody.
Exactly.
Beautiful, beautiful. Colleen, amazing story. So many different dynamics, so many different takeaways. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Absolutely unbelievable and we don't get enough codependency interviews, right? And I get asked for them all the time, but this is a perfect one for how to develop those boundaries.
Great. Thank you so much.
So now we're going to start to close up, and you know how we like to close up. I close up for the newcomer. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions about your early recovery, and I want you to respond with inspiring answers you can share with our newcomers. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Beautiful. So number 1, what was keeping you from getting clean or staying clean when you first got introduced to recovery?
That would be the what if life. I can't stop drinking forever. There's no way I can do it. That was the challenge.
One day at a time. That's how we sell it. One day at a
time. Yep.
That's how we sell it. Beautiful. All right. So number 2, at what point did you have a spiritual awakening, that aha moment in recovery when you accepted that you were powerless over drugs and alcohol, but for the first time had developed the hope that you could recover?
I would say after my 30 days when I was sober is when I had my aha moment. It wasn't a burning bush. It wasn't anything, super spiritual. But at that time when I knew I had people I could go to, and I was getting all kinds of advice. I was getting all kinds of aha quotes from people. That's when the light turned on.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love it. It does happen, and in many cases, it's so subtle or just a fleeting thought that comes in that brings you so much peace or gives you an opportunity to take action, and you're like, hey, what was that?
Yeah.
That was a God shot.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, God. I remember having just tons of those in early recovery. It was impossible for me to deny it. So number 3, do you have a favorite book that you would recommend to a newcomer that you read in early recovery?
Well, I use the book, The Women's Way Through the 12 Steps with my sponsees. It's not AA-approved literature, but I like to use it because it does focus on, it relates to women and women's concerns and worries in the world today. It is in plain English. You don't have that barley corn phrase that nobody knows what that is, kind of talk. I really do like that book. It's a 12-step book. It does help women relate to a lot of what's going on in their lives, and so I do recommend that one. Beautiful.
I love it. So number 4, what is the best suggestion you have ever received?
Oh, that's a hard one. I would say I would say the best advice I got was the one from my sponsor saying, I never said I was going to stop drinking forever. I just said I was going to stop drinking today. That was the best advice I got, because once you pass that 1-year mark of sobriety, I think that's when it hits you going, oh, crap. Now I've got to spend the rest of my life doing this, and that's when it really sits in. How am I going to go on vacation and lay on a beach, without a drink in my hand? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And that's when I started to freak out, was after my 1 year. And that's when my sponsor really put it into words. She goes, you're not making anybody any promises. You're making yourself a promise every day. And that's all you can do.
I love it. That's absolutely beautiful. And number 5, finally, if you could give a newcomer only one suggestion, what would that be?
My suggestion would be, of course, play the video through if you're going to pick up a drink. Like I said before, I like to romanticize alcohol. And I'll end it on this. My I look through magazines, and there's always that picture of the woman in the bathtub looking over Mexico with a glass of champagne in her hand, And to me, that's what drinking looked like.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my husband would like to take pictures of me when I was passed out as a joke. So what I have done is I have made a collage. I have the picture of the woman sitting in the bathtub on one side, and I have all these pictures of me passed out and vomiting and looking really ugly on the other side. And you say to yourself, that is fantasy. This is reality.
Oh.
That is not what drinking looks like for me. And so when I look at other people having a good time and having one glass of wine, that is not what drinking looks like for me. So you just got to keep it realistic.
You gotta keep it real. Oh, man. Now, my next question to you is going to be, which one of those would you allow me to post as part of your before and after? That would be awesome. If you would be down
I'll have
with
to
it.
dig through it. Yes.
If you can find one that you'd be okay with, the before and after pictures, people love that.
Okay.
Especially as we launch your episode, it'll get them to jump in there and I got to hear this story. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Because that is priceless. And it is so true. Not for nothing, but I wish I would have, I got rid of everything. I could not stand looking at myself.
Yeah.
I could not. It was horrific. I saw, I would have to, I don't even know where they are. Thank God there was no Facebook back then. Seriously, thank God.
Yeah.
There'd be some kind of floating, horrible, horrifying picture. I didn't even have a smartphone back then. So, you roll around taking selfies and that kind of a thing. So I'm grateful for that. But I think it's such a powerful, powerful reminder of where we were. And if you have those pictures, don't ever get rid of them. Hide them somewhere that when you need to, break glass in case of emergency, go to those and just ask yourself, do I really want to go here again? Do I really want to take that chance? Oh, man. So anyway, I'd love to have them.
Great. I'll look at it. Yeah, I'll find them for you.
I love it. Colleen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Amazing story. I love it. Thank you so much. All right. So, folks, we've now reached the end of our show. Thanks for joining us. And as we say here in Costa Rica, pura vida.
Pura vida.
Thank you for joining us on the SHAIR Recovery Podcast. To check out the show notes page on this interview or to thank our guests for sharing their story, go to www.theshairpodcast.com. While you're on the website, don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter to stay up to date on the latest news, podcasts, and interviews. Want to be one of our guests and share your story? Then go to our website and click on the Share Your Story button. We share our inspiring recovery stories every Tuesday, so subscribe to our show on iTunes or Stitcher Radio to get your free weekly download. We'll see you then. The opinions shared on this show reflect those of the individual speaker and not of any 12-Step Fellowship as a whole. And though we discuss 12-Step recovery and the impact it had in our lives, we do not promote or endorse any 12-Step Anonymous program.